Hello. Hello and happy Friday or whenever you're watching this. Is a-okay with me. Um yes, so this is a shorter live stream. A little floof in my mouth, that's normal. Um yeah, so this is a little bit shorter of a live stream because I get to go get a haircut today and I'm pretty excited. This piece right here especially is like driving me bonkers and I don't know what it ever did to offend me, but me and it got some beef apparently. Um Speaking of me and it having beef, we're here to talk about relationships. So how cool is that? Super excited for this topic specifically, this new relationship paradigms that the Libra New Moon is set to bring about. New moons in general are kind of like planting a seed of a new intention. Intention being like, what is it that you want? Like having a conscious awareness and understanding of what it is that you want is definitely a huge part of being able to create it in the physical world. Like nothing gets created in the physical world unless we can first imagine it. So, new moons are a lot like that. They're a lot about simply opening up to a new idea, a new concept, a new terrain inside of your own desire, a new consciousness about what it is that you want, some clarity around that, which always feels good in my book. So, this Libra new moon is happening on September 25th. And new moons are also when the sun is conjunct the moon. So the two luminaries, they come together at 3 degrees, almost 3 degrees of Libra on September 25th, and that creates a new moon. It's when the moon is the darkest because the moon and the sun are right there next to each other, and the sun's light basically like drowns out the moon's light, but they come together almost like a little conference, like let's get on the same page where our two luminaries, the sun and the moon, are very much like the sun being more our masculine side, the moon being more our feminine side, the sun being more of our ego personality, and the moon being more of our like subconscious emotions. So there's definitely like two very different roles that they play. But when they come together on a new moon, they get on the same page. And that's where that new intention kind of comes from. So, in my experience, setting a new intention sounds like a really active thing to do. And I think there is some action that you can take. And that's part of what I want to talk about today is like, what might that action look like? But at the same time, I also think it's kind of easier than that as far as these new intentions, especially because the moon is involved, we feel our way into them. It's very simple when you really just sink into what feels good to you. And to contrast that, what doesn't feel good to you. So that's part of these new intentions is transmuting these old experiences that didn't feel good. So I think, pretty much everybody on the face of the planet has at least one relationship, the relationship with their primary caregiver as they survived into their adulthood, and probably lots more relationships besides that. So it's like all of those experiences have filled in your awareness of what kinds of things within relationship with other people feel good when they happen and what kinds of things that happen in relationships don't feel good. And I think if we really like start looking in our past and in our experiences, it's pretty easy to tell that there are some things that we were not a fan of that happening, of them treating us that way, of them doing what they did, whatever the case was. And then there are other things that like what just popped in my head was a partner built like a little blanket fort and like hung up twinkle lights in there and like served me ice cream cake and we watched a movie in the blanket fort and that was what my birthday present was. Total surprise, like being surprised with like really thoughtfully curated experiences. That is something that for me, I say I don't like surprises, but actually that was a really really positive experience and I would love to have that kind of a vibe again someday. And so it's like really sifting and sorting. That's an Abraham Hicks law of attraction kind of terminology. And that's really what we're talking about here is like, and I wrote this in the description box of the video, this question of, will you take whatever is given and complain if it's not what you want? Or will you invest in getting clear inside of yourself as far as what you want so that when something is offered that is not what you want, you say thank you, but no. So I feel like there's this new era in relationship where the new relationship paradigm might sound like kind of like, the Aquarian age or like something that's like ushering in like the same experience for all of us, but I really don't think that's what's going on. I think it's a lot more individualized, like literally down to each and every single person, like not, "Oh, I've lived my life and here's my new relationship paradigm. This is what I'm looking for." But you've lived your own life. You've had your own experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly, and we all have plenty of material to start transmuting all of the things that we've gone through that were not what we wanted. We can transmute each and every single one of those into, okay, so what do you want then? Now that you've lived through that version and you know that that is not a match to what you're looking for, that helps us by knowing what we don't want, we know what we do want. So it's it's not about like saying it the right way or like being positive. Like that's not the point. That's actually, like, kind of where you can get down a rabbit hole of, like, toxic positivity if you're just trying to say the right words and to, like, be positive all the time. But there is a definite, like, transmutation. There's a shift in your frequency that we're talking about here. Like, when you're talking about relationship, are you talking about this past lover who disrespected me, and this past person who didn't think that I was smart, and this past person who cheated on me, and this past person who, like, is that the like what comes up when you think about relationship? Because law of attraction wise, like when that's what you're giving your attention to, like what's underneath all of that is fear and pain, and I don't want to be hurt like that again. So if that's like the dominant vibration of your story on relationships or like where your perspective is on relationships, you may even think that I want a relationship, but deep down, you don't want to be hurt again. And if you don't want to be hurt again, then you're not ready for a relationship. Because relationships, like that's the whole point of like coming together with another person is that it's going to inspire growth. There will be things where you're not on the same page. It's an opportunity to have a reflection of somebody from outside of yourself to help you see more clearly like what you got going on in your world. So if that's where you're at, like that's going to be a really hard place to attract any kind of like fulfilling, loving, heart centered relationship because not because you don't deserve it, not because that there's nobody that wants to give it to you, but because that's not where you are. Like the new relationship paradigm, I think that maybe this part does apply to everybody, question mark. Let me know what you think. Um, but the part that maybe applies to everybody is that we all can take full responsibility for our 50% of the relationship. So, for in that example, like if you're wanting a loving relationship and all you're bringing is fear and pain and old hurts and unhealed wounds, you're not bringing a loving relationship into the mix. So there can't be a loving relationship to come out of that. I think it kind of makes sense like that. So it's like we all have room to kind of like look and explore like our 50%, AKA like what is going on inside of ourselves and understand that we are bringing that self into the relationship and it will greatly skew towards us, whatever we have going on. That's kind of what the relationship is going to end up being. Like in early days, like I feel like I've had experiences where in the early days of like a new relationship, somebody with a drastically different vibration than yours. Like I was more melancholy and this person was more positive. And in the short term, they greatly influenced me to be more positive, and it felt really, really good. And I got attached because they were so positive. They were like sunlight in my world. And by attaching to them and needing their positivity, I pulled them back into my melancholy to where now we both feel bad. So I think, like, wanting to find the right person is obviously part of it, like, relationship includes another person most of the time when we think about it, but I think part of the new relationship paradigm is really prioritizing and understanding that the foundation of every single relationship, any relationship that you ever have, is the 50% that you're bringing to the table. And like we can't control what anybody else does, but we can absolutely choose for ourselves. Like, what is it that we're going to choose? Where and how do we pay attention? What do we choose to believe about ourselves? What do we choose to believe about the other person? These things are all within our control. And this Libra new moon, I think, is an invitation into your 50%. What is it that you're bringing into your relationships, because it's the same in all of them. Like, that's how my self-awareness, my self-worth journey, that's how my self-worth journey got started, was I recognized that yet another of my relationships had ended in exactly the same way, and I put the dots together that, like, the only common denominator in all of these relationships is me. And I went to therapy. 'Cause I'm like, "What am I doing?" And it was no self-worth. You're clinging onto these relationships because that's where your security is coming from. You're not finding it inside of yourself. I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's definitely accurate. You're telling me I can't do that? You can. You definitely can. Everybody gets to do whatever they want." But the new relationship paradigm, this is like an individual thing that we each get to birth within our own experience. So, like, really, it's a matter of simply asking ourselves the question, what do you want most in a relationship? And that's where we're inviting ourselves to, yes, look back at the past. Not from a sense of, "Let me make a list of all the grievances that have ever been done against me," but in a sense of, how can we learn from those experiences? What patterns can we see in our own choices and our own behavior that may help us to realize our 50% of, like, yeah, I mean, at like that example that I said, like, I could see in my 50% where, yeah, there's no security inside of me. So when I find somebody who is willing to be with me and like me and give me a positive reflection of myself, I need to hang on to them. I have to attach to them and I cannot let them go. And in my new relationship paradigm, for me, that doesn't work. In any of my past relationships, it hasn't worked. But that is like a big disclaimer right here as far as that has nothing to do with what's gonna work for you. Like, I'm gonna share some things that are part of my new relationship paradigm that, like, I've been thinking about and reflecting on, and, like, what do I want most out of a relationship? And the whole rest of this live stream is gonna sound like me talking about my preferences. And never at any point of it am I saying that this is the new paradigm. I'm sharing mine to hopefully help generate some reflection within you about maybe what does yours sound like. And before I go into that, I want to talk about, like, just super basic, this action that you can take, like, as far as this investigating your 50% and what might that look like. So, if you're not familiar with focus wheels, I'm going to answer the question real quick. What is a focus wheel and why does it work? So, a focus wheel is a picture's worth a thousand words, right? So, this is a focus wheel. In the center, I have one idea. The idea I have in the center of this focus wheel is new relationship paradigm and intentions. New new relationship paradigm and intentions. And then I started with one idea, mutual respect. That's on there. Mutual respect. We respect each other. We respect each other's autonomy. We respect each other's adulthood. We respect each other's freedom. We respect each other's privacy. Mutual respect. So that was the first idea. And when you start a focus wheel, all you need is one idea. So, new relationship paradigm and intentions. Do you have even just one piece of what that might look like for you? And then it just kind of builds itself in from there. The next one was balance. And then after that I was like, "Ooh, and equality." Yeah, equality. I like that idea in relationships. I like balance. I like knowing that I'm good and they're good and we get to come together and we get to share our energies with each other, but there's not I mean, to be blunt, there's not a parasite in the relationship feeding off of somebody else. And I say that with all the love in the world, recognizing that I myself have mostly been the parasite in especially my serious romantic relationships. Like I said, about like needing the other person's positivity or whatever boost I'm getting from them, I'm now addicted to their energy, and that makes me the parasite. So, balance, equality, like I want to bring my own energy to the table. Like I want to have something to contribute that's more than just I need to get something from the other person. So you see, like, I mean, it just kind of goes from there. And like you fill in this first ring, and then once you have like everything around the center ideas filled in, then I just start writing in the ring around that, and then I write in the ring around that, and then you write in the ring around that. And the point of why does a focus wheel work is because you are holding your attention onto that center idea. So the new relationship paradigm. So I sat for probably, I'm going to say maybe 20 to 25 minutes took me to fill that in. Um, and I was listening to something else. I was just kind of like half doing it, like as I would, oh, another idea came. Ooh, and this. Ooh, and this. Ooh, and this. You're not really trying to force it. You don't really have to if you really just stay on this idea of the new relationship paradigm. If you stay on that thought for 17 seconds, another thought joins it. And if you stay on the thought for 17 more seconds, then another thought joins it. And that's what a focus wheel is like you're allowing your energy, you're allowing your life force to go into what do you want? What is it that you want? And that I spent 25 minutes focusing myself into what I want. And the whole idea is that then, like, let's say mutual respect, perfect example, very easy to understand. Now I'm dealing with someone who is disrespectful towards me. And I recognize immediately that that crosses a line for me. Not that they're not allowed to disrespect me personally, but I have a hard time with like disrespectful people in general. Maybe it's because I was raised in the Midwest. Who knows? But, like, it's, like, just a very unloving thing to kind of just, like, smack down another person with, like, disrespect or belittling them or, like, whatever. So, like, to me, being disrespected tells me a lot about the inner state of the other person. Like, they're grappling, trying to claim power out in the world, and it shows me that they don't have that solid grounding inside of themselves. So, like, for example, I was, like, kind of dating somebody, it was very, very new and casual, and he said something and I said, "Oh, I think about it a little differently. I think about it like this." And he just kinda shut down and was a little bit pissy and passive aggressive and, like, called the night to a close, and then asked me out again. And I'm like, "See, I don't think you and I have what it takes to, like, have a conversation. Like, it doesn't seem like there's a basis of mutual respect where you're allowed to think what you think and I'm allowed to think what I think." So that tells me a lot about that relationship, and at that point, if you can recognize that I've just been handed something that I don't want, you can say, "Actually, you know what? You can keep that. Thank you so much, and have a nice life." And you can move on. At that point, it was like a very clear decision of And I think this is what would hold me up a lot in the past. It was a very clear decision of, do you want to continue to see where this goes? When, I mean, usually in the first few dates, people are on their best behavior. So if you're already seeing like that kind of behavior, like, do you want to keep going down that path? Or would you rather be alone? And that's the question, you know? Do you want to hold out for what you truly want and what you know in your heart you deserve? Or would you just rather not be alone? Like, having someone is better than no one. And I know for me, like back in my parasite days, that's where I was like, I can't be alone. So I would get out of one relationship and get into another one. And then there's 2 more years of like, they seem to kind of get progressively worse, like as far as the codependency and the level of fighting. And like, fighting is one of those things like where, no, that's a deal breaker for me. I don't fight with people. Like, we can have problem solving conversations. We can we can figure stuff out. We can talk about, what is your side? What is your perspective? What is my side? What is my perspective? You can cry, I can cry. I can feel my baggage and my fears and my wounds come up. You can feel your baggage and your wounds come up. We can have a conversation like that. That's not a fight. That's like us being on the same side, trying to unravel, what is this knot in the fabric between us? We can be on the same side in that. And again, in my old paradigm, I I was a fighter. I was a, like, somebody put it really well at one point. I heard somebody say like, honestly, it's harder to like walk away when you're mad sometimes, because fighting with the person actually feels more secure, because at least we're together, even if we're shoving each other and yelling in each other's faces, like that's what the fight is looking like. Like, I mean, I would stay and I would antagonize and I would escalate and I would yell louder and I would be like, say the most hurtful things I could think of to make them hurt as bad as I was hurting. And I don't know when. I don't I mean, I kinda see, like, yeah, it was pretty much when my self-worth journey started, where, again, it's like, I don't wanna fight it out with you. I don't wanna hurt you so that you feel the pain that I'm feeling. I wanna go within myself. I wanna resort to my journal. I wanna resort to my emotional support system if I have to, but I'm not ever willing to fight with the person that I love. Like, what a ridiculous concept. And that's something that, like, if you are in your relationship and fighting is where it's at and you like that and the other person likes that, like, who am I to judge? It's not my business what you choose to do with your significant other in the privacy of your relationship. But for me personally, so like, another good like that passive aggressiveness that I got off that person that, like, shut down as soon as I disagreed and, like, had a different opinion and, like, whatever, it's like, I can only imagine, like, that was just a little bit of, like, an ego affront that I disagreed with what he said, and I could only imagine, like, if I actually pissed him off, like, what his temper would really look like. And, yeah, like, if the person can't talk to me, at least at some point, like, Dolly's a great example of, like, we've literally never had a fight because we both have a tendency to, when we are really emotionally charged, we walk away. Like, there's a level of acknowledgement that, like, I am beyond being able to have that conversation right now, the one where we're on the same team and we're figuring it out together and I'm listening to what you're saying and you're listening to what I'm saying, like, I'm too emotional for that right now. And where I would used to, like, fight it out with the other person, now we walk away and you sleep on it. Maybe you sleep on it for a week. Maybe you sleep on it for 2 weeks. Maybe you take all the space you need until you're ready to come back together with the other person that you love and have a loving, mutually respectful conversation. So, like, some of the key topics that came up for me as I think about, like, kind of the structure of my own personal, like, new relationship paradigm, I think first and foremost is, like, taking responsibility for the emotions that I'm feeling. And I expect the other person to take responsibility for what they're feeling. And so that means like if, in my current relationship, if she says something that offends me or upsets me or whatever, my first order of business is to go within myself and figure out why. Why does that upset my apple cart? Why like, what are my self expectations? What are my expectations that I'm projecting onto her without even realizing it? Because it's impossible to be disappointed if you didn't have an expectation. So when I tell her something and I'm disappointed by her reaction to me, I had an expectation. And in that moment, I went into it without really consciously acknowledging that I was carrying that expectation and holding it onto her until she gave me a reaction that didn't match it. And now I'm like, "Ugh, how dare she not jump up and down with delight that I said what I said?" Like, so I go away and I figure out, oh yeah, yeah. I wanted her excitement to validate my excitement. I see. I see what I did there. Okay. And then you figure it out. She didn't do anything wrong. I had an expectation that, like, we don't get to put expectations on other people. That's like the whole point of autonomy. And that's like another of the big pieces that came up was trust. And trust for me and how I defined it maybe sounds like just a little bit different than what you've heard before. I wanted to see if I could, yeah, trust in the other person to care for themselves. Trust the other person to say no when they need to. Trust the other person to figure out any of their own emotional turmoil that they may be going through, and trust that if and when they need to loop you in on that, they will. Trust that they can choose for themselves all day, every day, what is best for them. And if and when that ever includes them taking their life in a direction that includes less and less of me or none of me at all, I trust that that too is in the highest good of the all. Um, so trusting the other person to make their own choices and trusting me to make my own choices. Ooh, authentic from the start. So this is something that we had a conversation like here very recently in the group coaching program about like kind of coming out as your authentic self or like you found a deeper level of authenticity within yourself and you're in a stage between finding it and fully expressing it. And the fear with fully expressing your authentic truth is that other people won't like it or they'll leave. They'll decide that they don't want to be around you anymore. And you'll lose people by expressing what is truly your authentic self. And it really got me thinking back to like how the layers of that and it is layers. It's definitely layers as far as your authentic self being able to come to the surface and merge with just your ego self, like kind of all being the same thing, being the same person all the time. Um, it happens in layers, and there's definitely a process to it. But I feel like at this point, and I say this like as a light at the end of the tunnel for anybody who resonates with that part, is like I feel like now I'm to a point where every new person I meet, I'm authentic from the start. So from day one, minute one, I know if they like me or not. I know if they resonate. They know exactly what they're getting and they can stay or they can go. And like there's no like doomsday. There's no doomsday of like what's going to happen when they find out this thing about me that they don't know yet. Like it's just not a thing, like, when you're going into it authentic, and so that's, like, a hope for the future maybe if, like I said, where you are right now is kind of in between finding your authenticity and expressing it. Um, the people one thing that I wanna say about that, and this is very interesting because I've never put this together before, and it's, like, definitely helping me to release some things even in this moment, but the people that are in your life for the chapter of you finding your authenticity and then becoming, like, an expresser of your authenticity, the people who are around you at that time are not there by accident, okay? It's it's basically however hard it feels to come forward with your truth because of, what about this relationship or what are they going to think or what about this consequence? Like anything that you have that feels like it's like that's holding you back from more openly expressing your authenticity, it's like that's not there by accident. Those are the hurdles, those are the challenges that you intended to be there so that you could decide. You could decide for yourself, like what's worth it and what's not worth it. Because if you're truly worried about upsetting this relationship, then just don't say anything. Keep your authentic self inside. Don't worry about expressing it. Can you do it? does it does that sound like, no, I want to express my authentic self? Then do it. And if this person decides that they can't handle it, then they can't handle it and they'll go away. And the thing is, like, it really reminded me as I was thinking about like these layers of coming out of the authentic closet. It really reminded me and kind of like sent me back through a past of when I very first posted um, my same-sex relationship, like, on my personal Facebook page. Like, I updated my relationship status to "in a relationship with Dolly," and the crowd went wild. No, it was actually not at all what I expected it to be like, um, and in my mind, like, we had been together for almost a year. We were, like, 2 weeks shy of a year at that point, and the reason that I felt like I want to do this, like, I need to do this, is because I was so happy. I was so happy. I was so proud of our relationship that, like, now I have 2 things stacked side by side. I have not wanting to upset people, not wanting them to think differently of me, not wanting them to have prejudice towards me or whatever it is that I was worried about. And then on this side, there's my satisfaction with my life and the literal joy that I had found. And holding that in got harder and harder and harder and harder to where it just naturally started to do this. And I think it was like already like this, like really spread apart before I ever got to that place where I was ready to post it. And before I came out of the closet publicly, I had gone through like, at that point, only like 2 people in the whole world knew that I was doing this or that I even like went this way or whatever. And so it was gonna be like brand new information for my whole family, for like I run a business in a very small town, for my whole community. Like it was, yeah, I knew that there was gonna be some attention on it. And so I went through like all of these pictures in my head of like, what is the worst case scenario that can happen? And I, yeah, and that I would lose important relationships and that I would have to figure out like how to navigate losing those important relationships. And before I ever pressed post or like, expressed my truth, I had to somewhat grieve those relationships. Like if these people do not resonate with my truth, like I am in love and I'm happy. And if they don't like that, then that's okay. Like that is none of my business. Their reaction is going to get to be whatever it is. And I only got one negative reaction out of the whole entire thing. And it was from one of the people that I was like, this would be worst case scenario if this person was one of the ones who was upset by what happens here. And that person didn't have Facebook. Like, I posted on Facebook, and I'm gonna say about 2 minutes later, this person doesn't have Facebook. This person texted me a screenshot of, like, the little thing that Facebook makes of, like, Carly Wharton is now in a relationship with Dolly, and, like, it's, like, the little thing, and, like, people have liked it, and, like, there's some comments on it, and it's, like, 2 minutes old. It's, like, 1 minute old in the screenshot, and that the person who screenshotted it, which I don't know who it was, texted it to this person texts it to me with a block of text, all, like, 2 minutes after it happened. And the block of text was basically like, "How could you? How could you do this to us? What were you thinking? This is absolutely the worst timing that you ever could have done this." It was a lecture via text. And in receiving that, it absolutely felt like a punch to the stomach. And more than anything else, it was exactly what I thought it would be as far as, like, if you can't be happy for my happy, seems like you're kinda short on your own happy, and that's not my problem. And I never responded to that text message, and our relationship carried on in a very different form than what it was before, but that person is working out their own thing, and their reaction to my happiness and my truth is none of my business. And I get to keep my happiness and I get to keep my truth because the people who are closest to me, they resonate with my authentic truth. And if ever there is somebody out there who doesn't, again, like, I'm not for everybody. None of us are. Like, none of us are going to be every single person's cup of tea. And in fact, I think there's even like, so Dolly and I, we live in a very small, we live in Kansas. It's like a red state, has always been a red state, like, and we live in a very rural county in Kansas. So very conservative population around us. And the August 2nd vote for abortion rights in Kansas came around, and Dolly and I, like, for practical purposes, like, we go together, and we came from the same place. We're going to the same place. We're going back to the same place. Like, we rode together. And we walked in there, and of course, like, the poll workers are all like 70-year-old women who, like, live in town, and I know every single one of them, like, on a first name basis, like, because of the grocery store. And so we walk in there together, and they ask Dolly her address, and one of the women pipe up and let everybody in there know, because she already knows, that, "Oh, doesn't she live with you? So isn't that the same as your address?" And, like, nosy. And it was just like you could just feel the ripple around, like, the group, like, the tense. And it was very interesting to, like, watch their reaction and, like, really get to observe, like, and then we left, and Dolly, like, tells me later, she's like, "So I've decided that part of my purpose in life, like, today at the vote place, like, the purpose wasn't to vote, the purpose was to make people uncomfortable." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I got some of that going on myself." So, yeah, like, when your truth ruffles somebody's feathers, like, how do you know that you and them didn't have some soul pact from before you got here, that you were gonna get close enough so that they could even have an expectation of you just so you could break their expectation, you know? Like, again, you can't be disappointed by someone that you had no expectations for, and this person reacting to my, like, relationship or whatever was extremely disappointed in me, and that tells me the version of the expected self that that person wanted from me, and I don't have to jump through that hoop. In fact, like, it's actually not doing them any favors to jump through their hoops because they you don't get to put expectations on people. Like, that's why we have free will. That's why we have autonomy. That's why all of us get to make our own decisions. So when we break somebody else's expectation and they are disappointed in us, that says a lot more about them than it ever does about us. And that is dissecting, like, the reaction that you're worried about. And I would take it a step deeper and say, like, what you're really worried about is that you're wrong. And that's the part where, like, if somebody has a dissenting opinion, do you still believe in what you believe in? You know, like I said, like I had to get to a really steep separation between this is how happy I am and this is how much I care about what people think about that. And it started like this. Was like, or maybe more like this. Like I'm pretty happy and I really like I have an idea of what I want people to think about me. And like sometimes it's like this, sometimes like this. And so for me it just had to get like really far apart, and then it was a no-brainer. Like I want everybody in the world to find this level of happiness inside their relationship. So let me let me put an example out into the world of what that looks like. Let me paint a picture. I mean, I don't share anything on social media. Even back then, we put that we're in a relationship, and that was really all we ever share. But like, even just our beingness in the world. Like I think about, I think about the end of one of my relationships when I was at the software company, and oh my god, like, when I had to stop looking at the highlights from my Google Photos because so often the highlight from, like, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it was, like, a picture of me with, like, crying face because I had, like, had to excuse myself during the workday and, like, I went into private, like, in the bathroom or, like, I went to walk around or whatever, and I would cry, and then I would, like, take a picture of myself to see if I looked like I had been crying so I could, like, go back into work, and yeah, I had crying face, and so that was like I was debilitated. I was visibly depressed. I was like an emotional wreck. I couldn't hold it together. And like here's my relationship and it's not going well and it's obviously taking a toll on me. And so I think like we all are kind of walking billboards for our relationship, like whether we mean to or not. And more than anything else, like walking billboards for the relationship that we have with ourselves. Because that's like part of the biggest update that I've personally unfolded, like since back then, my old paradigm is when my beloved is mad at me, when they need space, when they need to go off on their own and process what they need to process, I'm okay. It doesn't rip apart my inner security. It doesn't feel like a huge gaping void that I absolutely need to close as soon as possible. um, there is there's basically infrastructure inside of me at this point where my security is resting solidly on pillars that I put there that have nothing to do with what my beloved is choosing. So if they want to go away from me for 2 weeks because they're mad about something that I said, they'll be back, maybe. And if they're not, like, I'm still okay because my security is built on my own pillars, not on their conditional participation in my life. Um, so yeah, authentic from the start is where we started with all of that. It's it's so interesting how like coming out of the closet, I think that's actually something that like I know it might be easier to say that like the LGBTQ plus all of them community like has is at a disadvantage because there's so much prejudice. Um, that being said, I also think that there's an advantage to being in that community, which is this this dichotomy. This like my happiness is so strong that social norms and conforming with those matters less, and coming out of like the same sex relationship closet in July of 2020 was just the beginning. I mean, that was 6 months before my year of speaking truth, which was a big like basically me coming out of the authenticity closet for a whole year of speaking truth. Um, so it really is a process. It happens in layers, but I do think that there's something like about being in the LGBTQ plus community where you have a greater chance of like starting this process of coming out of the closet so that you can be who you really are. And once you've come out once, once you came out like with this piece, the next piece isn't quite as scary because you lived through coming out with the first piece, and then you come out with the third piece, and then the fourth piece, and then the fifth piece. And I'm still doing that. I'm still working through the layers of expressing my authentic self. And there's but at the same time, though, I think you do get to a place where there's enough of your authentic self, like, baked into your overall personality, like, it's kind of all integrated together, where, again, like, people kinda know right off the bat, like, if you're for them or not, and cool, whatever you decide. You love me, you hate me, like, I'm good. I'm good with it because there's a process of, like, building that relationship with yourself where, like, the pillars of my internal security, like, one of those pillars is one of those pillars is knowing my own value. So, like, being confident that I have value to add to the world. So, because I'm confident in that, if somebody else disagrees, like, you have your opinion and you should go and do other things. Like, I'm adding value. I know that. Like, you can't convince me that I'm not. And so that's like one pillar. I think another of the pillars is emotion management. Like, can you cope with your own inner turmoil when it bubbles to the surface? Or do you require something from the other person? Do you require help managing your emotions? And again, I would say this was very much me. My relationship partner was usually like a balancing effort as far as like when I was down, they'd cheer me up. When I'm like super excited, they celebrate with me. Like they were part of that mechanism that was like I was using their influence to keep myself somewhat balanced. And again, then when they go away, all hell breaks loose and it's not a great place to be. Oh, Andrea, I have found my relationships magically improve when I started loving myself through this spiritual journey this year. I'm seeing real solid change without trying to change them. I love that. And I'm so happy for you. That's so exciting. I'm telling you, like, updating your 50% of the relationship, like, you are a giant stakeholder in this situation, and you updating what you're doing with your 50% will greatly impact every single relationship that you have in your whole life. Ooh, interesting. Okay, so this little bit, perfect. We're perfect time. If you have any questions or thoughts, I invite you to share them in the chat now. I'll be clicking off here in about 10 minutes. I gotta go get my floofs chopped. I'm so excited. But yeah, this relationship with self. This is part of where this conversation germinated. Was again back in the group coaching program last weekend when somebody asked a brilliant question that I think is so relatable, which is why do I feel like a burden on other people? And with that, I would highly recommend that you check out the Dr. K video that is on the prep playlist for this week that is called I also just searched like Dr. K, or sorry, I searched Healthy Gamer Burden. Healthy Gamer is the name of his channel, and then Burden, and he has actually several videos on the subject of feeling like a burden. Um, why do I feel like a burden? That's the name of this video that I highly recommend. Um, and his main advice within kind of the end of that video, which the conversation all the way through is extremely helpful, I think. Um, but at the end of that video, like really what he's advocating for is to investigate kind of the root of why do you believe that you're a burden? Why do you believe that that's what's happening? Kind of like where did that belief come from? Do you remember when you started believing that? Did anybody ever tell you that? What kinds of feedback have you like what kind of dots did you connect to come to that conclusion that I'm a burden? And then kind of using the Byron Katie 4 questions of is that true? Is it true that I'm a burden? And he talks through that in the video as far as like You know, burden is definitely a negatively connotated word, and he swaps it out for influence. Okay. So, like, we influence the people around us. And his point was like a depressed person, for example. Like, when you're depressed, and let's say you share a household with like a few other loved ones, when there's a depressed person in the household, it is a burden on everybody else that's trying to be in that house. Like, it's kind of pulling the energy down, and it's burdening the house. That's true. um, so he's partly kind of validating that if you feel like a burden, you feel like you're negatively influencing the people around you, maybe that's true. Like, don't just be quick to assume, like, oh no, you're not a burden, you're fine. Like, maybe that's true. And in this case, he was talking to somebody who was an 18-year-old kid. So he's like, that's what children are. They're dependent. They burden their parents. That's like the whole point of children. Um, but this idea of influence, that like we all always influence the people around us. So you influence them to feel better, you influence them to feel worse. That's basically the only option. And that's always going on. So he asks this person, is it okay to do that? Is it okay to influence the people around you? And that is a really good question, because you can't help it. For one thing, like, you're always going to have an influence on anybody that you spend time with. And that question is like really helpful, I think, in one, like paying attention to what kind of an influence do you have on other people, and two, taking responsibility for that influence. Like, if you truly don't want to influence people in a negative way, then what is a 1-degree turn that would help you, move your influence into a more positive place? Those are the kinds of changes that are nearly impossible to make like overnight all at once. But again, a 1-degree turn towards having a more positive influence on the people around you. And sometimes it's as simple as removing your focus from the people around you and putting it back on yourself, so that you can ask yourself, what is it that you need right now, and how can you work to meet those needs yourself without needing other people to help you do that. So, yeah, exploring the origins of those beliefs. It is totally fair that you influence the people around you, they influence you too. That is how it always is going to be. We share energy back and forth. Um, and that it's like we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to constantly be a positive influence or a negative influence. It's really more just about like kind of going back to that expectations piece and checking those every once in a while, as far as like, yeah, what kind of an influence do I expect from other people? What kind of an influence am I willing to tolerate from other people? Like, I know for me personally, like, let's say two different scenarios. One, you're dealing with your beloved, like the person that you're in a relationship with, and they're mad and griping and like had a run in, and like they're really upset or emotional about it. Like, my reaction to that is going to be completely different than, like, let's say I click into a video on YouTube and I see somebody having the exact same moment. For me personally, I'm going to click out of that immediately, because I'm not going to let some random parasocial energy influence me in a negative way. But my beloved, like, again, we come back to that conversation of like, can we have a productive problem-solving conversation? If you're not ready for that, then, like, let's cry it out, let's dance it out, let's, like, get the emotions out, so that then we can have, like, a problem-solving conversation together. Um, but yeah, the influence back and forth, like, again, that kinda goes back to, like, this focus wheel, as far as, like, what kinds of influence are you wanting to make onto the people that you're in relationships with? What kinds of influence are you wanting them to have onto you? A good example of that, one of the things that I wrote down is safety on all levels. That is the influence that I want to have on other people. I want to influence them to feel safe around me. And that's basically what I'm looking for in relationship is I don't get close to people that I don't feel safe with. If I don't feel safe to be myself, then that's not my person. That's somebody else's person. I'm going to leave them out there for them to find their other people. And I'm going to gravitate towards the people where I feel safe on all levels. I feel safe to express my sense of humor. I feel safe to express my temper, my agitation, my annoyance with life sometimes. I feel safe to express my sexuality. Like I feel safe to express my raw emotions. These are the kinds of safety when I say safety on all levels, like, that is something that's just one more example of, like, in my own new relationship paradigm, that is something that is basically non-negotiable for me. Like, I don't know how to have a relationship with someone where I'm not safe with them because, yeah, there's, like, so much as far as trust and like working through those knots in the relationship where safety you have to have that. Like if you're worried that you're going to say the wrong thing and this person's going to blow up at you, you're not safe to express your opinion. And at that point, like how are you going to have a balanced, equal relationship with that kind of a person? So it's it's not about finding the perfect person. It's definitely not, and for that, I recommend another of the Dr. K videos that's on the prep playlist for this week, which is called The Science of Love, and it was so perfectly timed because this week I felt like I was getting downloads around the technology of love and, like, what is love actually for? And so he's presenting it in, like a way more scientific context, but so much of it like matches up with what I was understanding earlier this week. And so, yeah, there's definitely not it's not encouraged to like this all of these things are like you being like when a person has all of this, then they'll be the perfect person and then we'll have the perfect relationship. It truly is like going through your 50%, checking your own expectations. Like that's something that, like, maybe it's not safe to say that we can't put expectations on people, but I would say, like, it's definitely not fair to put uncommunicated expectations onto people. So, if you expect that someone treat you with mutual respect, it's like you knowing that ahead of time is going to influence your choices, not their behavior, your choices. And that's all of these things can ever do is help us decide in closer alignment with our own authentic truth. Little by little by little in the layers that rise to the surface, one piece at a time, in the experiences that we have with other people that let us see very clearly what we do not want, that help us to understand even more clearly what we do want, so that we can focus on what we do want, so that we can recognize more clearly when those attributes show up in people around us, so that we can call out the safety that we feel. Like that's one of the main topics of conversation if you've been watching the full moon heart to hearts that we're having with me and Jody and Maddie. We have an offline conversation going behind the scenes. And one of the things that comes up so often is just celebrating how safe of a space we're creating together. And the fact that we talk about it a lot tells me that all three of us wanted it and we're looking for it and we're safe within ourselves, safe within our own 50%, at least enough to be able to come forward and like test the boundaries and kind of tiptoe out into, am I safe with you? Am I safe with you? Like we do have to be our own safe space first, right? Like if we're not safe with ourselves, it's impossible to put anything out there that you would be able to test if you're safe with another person. Um, so yeah, there's a lot, like an hour's worth of rambling, and I think I stayed pretty close to my notes, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on like if you do decide to fill out your own new relationship paradigm and intention. Like, if you decide to fill out your focus wheel, I would love to hear what some of the themes that came up for you. Like, what did they sound like? What are the things that you want to contribute to your relationship? What are the things that you're expecting from the other people that you're in relationship with? Um, yeah. What does that look like? And as far as kind of one more thought on new moons, these seeds, these new clarity, new consciousness, awareness of new conscious awareness of what we want, that seed gets planted on the new moon, and then it that's the Libra new moon. And then on the Libra full moon, that is basically when, like, this new seed, when you can expect a harvest, a manifestation of some sort to show you kind of the progress that you've made since September 25th when the seed is getting planted. Um, and the Libra full moon happens during Aries season. So in 6 months, when the sun has reached Aries and the moon is in Libra, that will be the Libra full moon 6 months from now. And that is when we can expect to see kind of a check in as far as manifesting the new relationship paradigm. So, with that in mind, it's very exciting to think about it. Really, in the grand scheme of time and the history of all things, 6 months is like nothing. So, it's, like, crazy to think with just, like, a few, like, focus wheels, like, a little bit of deliberate, intentional investigation of your 50%. Like, it's very interesting to me to imagine where we will be in 6 months' time. And with that, kind of just as, like, a personal, um yeah, like a personalizing this energy for yourself, what house do you have 3 degrees of Libra in? And that house is where these relationship new paradigms, like, that's a good indicator of where you can expect the new paradigm to play out at maybe first. Relationships are one of those things where it's kind of like what Andrea was saying, where when you mess with your 50%, I mean, you're adding that to every single relationship that you have. But for example, my 3 degrees of Libra is in my sixth house. So to me, that speaks to the sixth house, speaks to like our daily routine, our daily work habits, the people that we see on a daily basis as a result of our daily routine and our work habits, um, our daily health, the health that we possess as a result of our choices. So there's a lot of different ways to go with that, but definitely work is a common theme that you would think is gonna have kind of a dominant role in my own personal unfolding. So see what house 3 degrees of Libra falls into for you. Like a couple other examples, like let's say 3 degrees of Libra was in your third house. Maybe the relationship dynamics are more playing out like with your siblings or your neighbors or something like that, where it's more a relationship of circumstance is kind of those third house. Like, I didn't, well, maybe you believe we picked our siblings, but you definitely just kind of showed up at the same place. You didn't really plan to all be there together consciously in the human form anyway. Maybe in the non-physical, if you want to believe that. I certainly do. Um, but yeah, the new relationship paradigm that you are giving birth to is possibly going to revolutionize every relationship in your life within the next 6 months. And the work, the action that is within your realm to contribute is to look within your 50%. Ask yourself these questions. What is it that I want to add to my relationships? What am I bringing to the table? What feels good to contribute? Like, I love to make people laugh. I love to tell them stories where they connect dots in their head, and then they tell me a fun story that they're like, "Gosh, I haven't thought about that in 20 years," and then they tell me the story. I love it when I influence people to feel safe enough to where they tell me, "I've never told anybody this, so don't say anything, but And then they tell me something that, felt like a deep, dark, buried truth within themselves that has never seen the light of day. And because of the influence that I provide, because of the safety that I provide, they're able to bring that level of truth to their own surface and express it. So there's a lot of room to kind of what do you want? What do you want in your relationships? Literally, the world is your oyster. Your new relationship paradigm does not have to look like any other relationship that has ever existed. And maybe when you're in your authenticity, chances are there's going to be at least a little bit of it that isn't like anything else that's ever existed because you're not anything that has ever existed, right? The whole reason we are each and every one of us here is because our individuality is needed in this big, diverse soup that we are all swimming in. So, when we make choices in alignment with our own highest truth, chances are we're probably going to step outside the lines a little bit of what traditional relationship looks like. And that's okay. We can have whatever we want. So, yeah, I would love to hear from you if you decide to fill out a focus wheel or do any kind of reflecting on your own relationship paradigm. I'm also super excited to like get to look back on this in 6 months when it comes to the Libra full moon and kind of like just take stock and even flip back to like this focus wheel that I did and see like did these things heighten in my experience or like what happened in that time. Yeah. Well, that would I hear you, Andrea. That's a good question that comes up a lot. I feel like when we look at like the different house systems of like maybe 3 degrees Libra is in your 12th house, or maybe it's in your first house, depending on which of those house systems you use. Um, and that's where that my 2 cents on that is like if you're not 100% sure about the house, this is my own magical thinking. This is maybe what gets me in trouble, maybe what helps me be happy, I don't know. But I'm gonna say, like, if you're not sure, it doesn't matter, you know? Like, if you don't know what house it is, it's not part of it. Like, there's plenty to go off of just with the Libra, just with the relationship idea, just with exploring your 50%, which includes all of you, all of your houses, right? So I think like the house is only if it's helpful. If that, and maybe it's helpful, like, Andrea, in your case, like here in a few months, you see like your whole self has kind of transformed, like, which is already kind of what it sounds like is going on this year with you. Um, so yeah, I mean, maybe that is a good signal that it's happening more in your first house. Something to just like keep in mind if it's helpful, if it adds to your understanding, then pull it in. And if it muddies the waters, then I'm tempted to leave it out of the equation, and focus back on the part that feels clear. So those are just my, like I said, 2 cents, and everybody's going to get to kind of understand their own transits however they can. So yeah, I thank you guys so much for joining me today. I really had fun talking about this topic. I absolutely love the concept of relationship. I think at some level that's kind of why we're here is to like connect with the other beings on this planet. So relationships are truly at the heart of the fabric of our lives and our existence. So what what better ground, what better practicing ground for our own spiritual development and evolution and the patterns and practices that we want to cultivate within our 50% so that then we can bring them into every single relationship we encounter. So glad to hear that, Irene. So glad you could make it. With that, I will leave you guys there. If you haven't already, please do think about liking this video, subscribing to the channel, leaving me a comment. All of that does help push this content out into the YouTube universe and helps the people who are meant to cross paths with it cross paths with it. So thank you for doing your part. If you find value here, until next time, dear friends, I do hope you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I. Have a good one. Okay, bye bye.